Hi, and welcome to another video by Jim the Car Guy. Today we have a 2003 Toyota Camry. The problem we have with this one is that the brakes on here, when you're driving in, for a short period of time around the city or even on a highway, the brakes feel fine. As the customer drives the vehicle longer, the brakes tend to pulsate more and more to the point where you can drive in the city and you could feel the steering wheel rocking like crazy. You could feel your foot pulsating up and down on the brake pedal as well. So I'm going to show you how to diagnose what the problem is and how to correct it the first time without having to worry about doing the job 2 or 3 times. All right, I did take a look at it because I had to price the job out already for the customer. Right side is done. We are now going to do the left side. But I'm going to bring it in there. I'm going to show you a couple of things. How to diagnose what the problem is and why the brake is staying applied. The next problem we're going to deal with is what tools you're going to need to get the job done. So I have everything laid out up in the front for you. I'll explain what tools you're going to need as well. And what we are going to change, we're going to change the brake rotor, the brake caliper. Also, we're going to change the brake pads and the hardware kit. As you know, the new caliper and mounting bracket comes with the new hardware kit, so you want to make sure you use that. So come on, I'll bring you up front. I'm going to show you how to diagnose it, and then we're going to get started. What happened in this particular case is that the slide pins have rusted. The slide pins actually, when you step on the brake, it pushes the brake caliper closed and applies the brake pad. When you take your foot off of the brake pedal, it's supposed to pull back out. In this case, the slide pins are now sliding, so it applies and it stays on and it doesn't release. As soon as I got back from driving this vehicle, I kind of knew what it was because when I took it, but when I got the vehicle and took the wheels off, I shot the lug nuts off and I could feel the lug nuts were red hot, which is a good indication that the brakes are staying applied. So enough talking, let's get up there. I'll show you what to do and how to figure out what's going on. Okay, now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come in here with a small screwdriver, or you know what, let me show you what tools you're going to need first. This is what you're going to need to do this job. We are going to be changing the rotor, as I said. We are going to be changing the caliper and the mounting bracket. Of course, the brake shoes and brake pads. But this is an example of what kind of tools you're going to need. You're going to need a tool like this to clean off any kind of rust that's on the hub itself. A tool like this to push the brake pad or brake piston back into the bore. A small pry bar such as this to push the pistons back in as well. A long-handled ratchet with a 14 millimeter. We're going to use another long-handled ratchet with a 17 millimeter, and then we're going to need a 12 millimeter possibly to put this back together, possibly, I'm not sure. A small pair of pliers to actually pinch off the brake line very, very lightly. We're going to need a small wrench like this to bleed the brakes out, some synthetic brake grease, and of course some brake cleaner, and a rag to clean everything up, and of course my trusty kit here to hold the sorry about that, and of course my tray in order to hold the bolts that were taken out. All right, so what we're going to do first is we're going to come in here and we're going to put a small pry bar right through here, and we're going to put this in here and we're going to pry this back like this. Now I did do this like I told you. I did check it already. Let's turn this out a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, I did put a small pry bar in here to try to pry it out, but as you can imagine, it was pretty rusty and it wouldn't move. So you can see how it's moving on the top, but down on the bottom over here, the top one does, but the bottom one doesn't. So what they do is you come in here with a small screwdriver or pry bar. We're going to push the piston all the way back into the bore as far as it can go. So we push the piston all the way back in, and the way you can tell that these slide pins are no good is because this caliper here should slide back and forth freely, and as you can see, it does not slide. So we know that these slide pins are no good. Now the choice you have is you can change the mounting bracket or you can change the entire caliper assembly. I choose to change the entire assembly because this vehicle here, the brakes are overheated, which means that the rubber boot inside here is going to be in pretty poor condition. So I'm not taking a chance. I'm doing this job one time and it's going to be finished. All right, now, okay, so now what we do, we come in here, we take out that bolt, we loosen, this bolt we loosen, and then we take the brake line off. But before we take the brake line off, we come in here with a pair of pliers and we pinch off this brake line right here so that the fluid doesn't flow through it. We're just going to pinch it very lightly, not too hard. And then we'll take that line off, and we're going to take out the little tiny washers that are in here. They're made of brass or copper. We're going to take those out and throw them away, and we're going to use new ones. Then, like I said, we're going to take out that 14 millimeter and that 14 millimeter. We're going to take the caliper off, and then that's trash. Then we're going to come in the back over here. We're going to take out that 17 millimeter bolt there, and there's another 17 millimeter bolt up underneath here on the bottom right there. So we're going to take that out as well. And then we'll take the caliper off the vehicle, the mounting bracket, and then we'll clean up this hub underneath here where the hub fits up into the back of the rotor. So sounds easy, but you know, let's get started and we'll see how it goes. Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to pinch off that brake line, not too tightly, just enough to keep the fluid from flowing through. A little bit like that. And now we're going to take out that bolt in the back of the caliper. I'll switch over here so maybe you can see a little better. You see a little better like that? Yeah, probably. All right, so we're going to take this and break this one loose. Remember, it's counterclockwise, of course. Now, with the caliper bolts themselves, the ones that hold the caliper to the mounting bracket, you want to break both of the bolts loose first before you take off the top or the bottom one. You want to break them both loose first. Makes it just a little bit easier. You want to make sure you have a bucket down below to catch the fluid. As you can see, it does leak a little bit. We're going to take this off, and you're going to dispose of that washer right there. We don't need it. Some calipers come with the new bolt, some don't. This one did not, so we are going to use this over again. All right, and now we'll take off the line. We're just going to relocate the line off out of the way like that, and then we'll take off these bolts here. Okay, and then we'll take the caliper off the car. It is going to leak a little bit, so be careful. So we're going to let it drain into a bucket. All right, then we're going to take off those two 17 millimeter bolts in the back. As you can see, the pads themselves, they still look pretty good, but the slide pins do not slide. This one is actually the one that's rusted. All right, so now we're going to break the bolts loose to hold the mounting bracket on. Now, before you take out this bolt here, you want to make sure you break the upper one loose as well. Otherwise, you'll try to break this one loose and this bracket will rotate up. All right. And of course, after you have them loosened up, then you just take the bolts out totally, hold the bracket so it doesn't fall off. So this is what the problem is. This bracket here, this bolt is rusted in place into here. Like I said, you can change just the bracket. I'm not doing it that way. I'm changing the caliper at the same time because when this stays applied, it builds up a tremendous amount of heat, and it does cause the boot to start to leak as well. So we're going to do this one time and we're going to be finished with it. All right, I'm going to take the rotor off of the car. And now what we're going to do, we're going to get an air line. And we're going to come in here and we're going to clean this up right up inside here. So once we get this cleaned up, then we'll come back, but we're just going to use a disc to clean that up. So let me grab an air line and we'll continue. Now this is our new rotor. Rotors come coated with oil or grease to keep it from rusting. So you take some brake cleaner, you spray it down like this, both front and back, and then you just wipe it down with a rag, and that gets the majority of the oil off of it. All right, we'll take our rotor, place it back on the vehicle. Now what I normally do is screw a lug nut on here. It'll hold the rotor in place and keep it from moving around while you're trying to put it back together. So take a second and put the bolt on there, and you'll have less fumbling with the brake pads to get it back together. Okay, now the rotor doesn't go anywhere. Okay, now the brake caliper itself, we're gonna put the bracket on first. So we're gonna take out this bolt, and then we'll put the hardware on. So we're going to do that right now. As you remember, these were 14 millimeters. So let's do this down on the bench here so you can watch, all right? Get a couple of tools out of our way. Alright, so just break this loose. Break this loose. And now we'll take out these bolts here. The ones that came with the old one, we're going to get rid of them. We'll take these out. These are the bolts we're going to use when we put it back together. And that's what a slide pin is supposed to do. It's supposed to slide back and forth, just like that. Okay, nice and freely. Same here, right? Okay, now we're going to take our hardware, and the hardware can only go on one way. You just put it over the top like this, push it down, just like that. Make sure that this part here is pushed down all the way in there as well. And then we'll put the other one on just like this. Push it down like that. Make sure it's pushed in right there as well, which it is. We're going to take a little bit of synthetic grease and put it on any place that the brake pad is going to rotate or slide. You want to just lubricate it just a little bit. Now I find it easier to put the brake pads in here instead of in the vehicle. So that's what we're going to do. Put it on like this. All right, that's the one pad. Put this here. And we'll put our second brake pad in as well. All right, and now we're going to take the brake pad, brake caliper with the brake pads, and put it back onto the to the vehicle. Okay, put it over the top like this. Put it in and squeeze the brake pads together, just like that. Then we'll reattach the bolts that hold. You want to catch both of them in there first before you tighten them up. And once they're caught, then you can come in there with your ratchet and you can tighten them down. Just snug these down. Sorry about putting my back to you. Okay. And that's it. Brake pads are in. Mounting bracket is now mounted on. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our caliper and put our caliper on. Now remember, when you put the caliper on, there is a left and a right side. Your bleeder valve has to be on the upper part of the caliper. It cannot be on the bottom. It has to be on the upper part. So make sure you put the left and right on the correct side. Put this over the top like this. I just want to point this out before I do. Tiny little bit of silicone every place that that's going to touch the brake pad itself, which means the piston and also the mounting bracket itself. Just a little bit on each one of the pieces that touch the pads. Put this over the top. And you're going to catch both of the bolts in there first before you tighten it up. Now once you have both of them caught, then you can tighten it up. Now sometimes when you try to tighten this up, these slide pins here rotate. If that happens, you just take a small wrench like this and you hold it like that so that it doesn't rotate. That's not going to be the case here, but sometimes it does happen. Alright, so now our caliper is tight, our mounting bracket is tight. Next thing we're going to do now is, you remember that bolt? We cleaned off all the grease that was on here and any dirt. We're going to take a new washer, drop a new washer on, just like that. And then we're going to take the line, put the bolt through here, put this other washer on this side right here, and then there's this little, wait 1 second. Okay, so now after we have the washers on there, we have the washer in the front and the back. We're going to make sure that this little pin right here fits into the recessed hole in the back right over here. So we're going to catch it by hand first. Before we do anything further, we're going to screw it in by hand. Hey buddy, how you doing? Whoop. Give me 1 second, I'll be right back. Okay, so now like I was saying, we're going to screw this in by hand. Before we do anything, we're going to catch it a couple of threads. Okay, now we're just going to snug it down. Now we're going to make sure that that little pin is right in there where it belongs, and then we'll just snug this down. You don't want to go too tight and strip this out, so be careful. Okay. All right. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to take off the vice grips that are actually pinching the line off. And then we're going to open up the bleeder valve here, and we're going to let it gravity bleed out. And once it starts dripping through that bleeder valve, we're going to close it off, and then we'll finish up the other work that we need to do. So we're going to let that bleed out a little bit, and after it starts dripping, then we'll close it back up. Okay, now that it's dripping out of here, we're going to close this up. All right, let me explain to you what we're going to do. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to actually... All right, so the brake job is totally finished. Now we're going to bleed the brakes out. I got to wait for my assistant to come back. As soon as he comes back, we're going to bleed the brakes out. Basically, all you're going to do is have the assistant sit in the vehicle, pump the brake several times to get the pedal up on top. You open up the bleeder valve, they push that brake pedal to the floor, and then you close the bleeder valve. And you just repeat that process until all the air comes out. And that's it, you're all done. It is normal to get a little bit of a burning smell. It is normal to see a little bit of smoking as well from here. but that's it. You should be fine after a short period of driving. You'll be actually in good shape. All right, as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.